This is Dr. Mark Changizi here with your Science Moment. Today, we're going to talk about the emotion space that emanates from Dr. Tim Barber in my book, Expressly Human. You may have seen emotion spaces out there, these little circles with different kinds of emotions hither and thither. Those are unscientific. They're not based upon some kind of reality. Ours is an emotion space that emanates from first principles. It is exactly the space of emotional expressions, the language that languageless animals need in order to negotiate with one another. Here, we explain it for you easily. Here's the space. There are 81 emotional expressions in the space that comes out of our first principles theory. There's 9 groups of 9. And let's see if we can make sense of this without having to understand the entire space all at once. We really only need to understand 2 simpler spaces. The first is this, and it concerns the distinction between happy expressions and unhappy expressions on the one hand, the horizontal, and surprised versus relaxed expressions vertically. Any combination of these 2 dimensions leads to the 4 corners, for example, shown. But we also need to understand a second space. This one has a horizontal that concerns being aggressive versus conciliatory. This means wanting more versus less in a particular situation. And vertically is the difference between being serious versus being casual. Again, combinations of these vertical and horizontal axes lead to different corner expressions. Once we figure out which emotional expression in each of those two-dimensional spaces applies, we can combine them together and learn which emotional expression in the entire space it is. Here are the 2 smaller spaces next to the larger space. The top space corresponds to the centers of each of the 9 regions. As you can see, for example, an unhappy face corresponds to the center of the right side region. While the first space tells you where within this diagram you end up, which of the 9 regions, the second space tells you which of the specific faces in that region do you land on. If in the first space no face is chosen, then that means we start from the very center face in this entire diagram and move in some direction from there. Now let's try it in a non-central region. Suppose, for example, that you're expressing unhappiness. In this case, it means that we'll be in the region on the right side, shown with the yellow circle. But now imagine that you're also showing pride. You're prideful. In this case, we're going to move up and to the left within the right side region, shown like this. If you're expressing unhappy and also expressing pride, that means that in totality, you're angry. Said the other way, angry just is a combination of the unhappy expression with that of pride. If you're still showing unhappiness, but instead are signaling respect, well, then that moves up and to the right within that same region. The combination of those 2 things is fear. That is to say, fear is a combination of unhappy and respect. Continuing around the circle, if you signal unhappy, but also humility, well, then that brings you down and to the right within that same region to sad. That is to say, sad just is a combination of unhappy and humble. And finally, within that region, finishing the circle, if you're expressing unhappy, but now also simultaneously expressing disdain, that brings us down into the left within that region to something like disgust. That is to say, disgust is unhappy and disdainful. A few moments ago, we saw how angry is a combination of unhappy and pride. Well, what happens if you're instead happy? In this case, suppose that you're expressing happy, but now you're still expressing pride. In this case, the resultant emotional expression is moving up and to the left from happy in the center of the left side region. The emotional expression there is not at all angry. It's something more like smug, which is to say, smug is a combination of happy and prideful. If you were still expressing happy, but instead simultaneously expressing respect, well, whereas before, when it was on the right, unhappy side, that was fear, now it's something like appreciative. And if you're signaling happy, but now also signaling humility, that's not sadness as it was when we were on the right, unhappy side, but is now modesty. That is to say, modesty is happy and humble. And rounding out the circle on the left-hand region, if you're still signaling happy, but now signaling disdain, in the context of you signaling happy, the disdain means that in totality, you're something more like sneering. Now let's imagine that you're still signaling disdain, but instead of being happy or unhappy, you're signaling relaxed. In this case, we're in the bottom region and down to the left from the center, and we're at something more like teasing. It's like being disdainful, but not in a serious way. If you're still showing disdain, but also showing surprise, it's a completely different story. Now it's something along the lines instead of insulting. In this way, you can see how, for any emotional expression in this gigantic space on the right, which is four-dimensional, you can unpack it in terms of two simpler emotional expressions. One from the first two-dimensional space on the upper left, which we call acknowledgments, and one in the bottom left emotional expression space, which we call responses. Each of the emotional expressions in this space is not just an emotional expression. Each is signaling a particular move in a negotiation or a compromise or a discussion with another social animal. The space of all negotiation moves, each move within that negotiation space corresponds to one of the emotional expressions in this space. And said the other way around, each of these emotional expressions amongst the 81 corresponds to a distinct kind of negotiation move, so to speak, between two social animals. To get the full grand unified theory of emotional expressions and how they came to be in not just us humans, but in all social animals, and how they undergird free expression itself amongst social networks, get Expressly Human.